Okay, so the Chabad custom, as is many customs within many communities, is to continue learning a chapter of ethics of our fathers, of Pirkei Avot, throughout the summer, all the way to Rosh Hashanah. There are a number of customs about that. And you can look online. I did a class on the history of these different customs if you're interested. It's quite interesting, actually. Anyway, so almost everybody learn studies Pirkei Avot between Pesach and Shavuot, 6 weeks, 6 chapters. And many, including Chabad, have the custom to continue doing so all the way to Rosh Hashanah. So on second cycle, we would now be chapter 1, Shabbos. So what we're doing here is we're looking at one of the passages there, a rather famous one. And we're going to look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers of interpretation to one and the same teaching. The teaching reads like this. Joshua ben Prachia and Nitai of Arbel, in Hebrew, Yeshua ben Prachia and Nitai Arbeli. They received their oral tradition from them, right? The first chapter, the first passage of the first chapter begins with a description of the tradition. Moshe Rabbeinu received Torah from Sinai, passed it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders, and so on. And then the subsequent Mishnahs quote teachings from each of the generations or the leaders of the generations that were responsible for that transmission of the tradition that we have. And therefore the teaching begins with so and so and so and so received the tradition from the people talking in the previous Mishnah, and they said X. And then the next Mishnah will begin so and so and so and so received from them, and they said X, and so on and so forth. Just explaining the context of that opening line. So Yeshua ben Prachia said, the Hebrew and the English, Asay lecha rav, provide yourself with a teacher, or make for yourself a teacher. Uknei lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. Hagadan es kol adam l'kav schos, and judge every person favorably. All three of these lines are rather famous. Make for yourself a teacher. Person needs a guide in life. Acquire a friend. Everyone needs someone to share with. And then judge every person favorably. So we're going to be focusing on that last line, judge every person favorably. Now, none of the commentaries say that this is what they're addressing. But it would seem to me that the common theme between all of the commentaries we're going to look at is the following understanding. In modern thinking, the common phrase is, don't judge anyone. That's the common phrase. Don't judge anybody. Don't judge me. Don't judge anyone. And the Mishnah does not say that. It doesn't say don't judge anyone. It says go ahead and judge them, but do so favorably. It's almost like an instruction. Go judge someone, but you should do so favorably. So there's something about the act of judging favorably that is beneficial either to the person doing the judging or to the person being judged. Another Mishnah, which is a similar statement, says, don't judge someone until you come to their place, which, as we're going to see, that phrase does begin with don't judge them, don't judge someone until you come to their place. But as we're going to see, in Tanya, that's understood to mean make sure you put yourself in their position and then judge them, as we're going to see. And that's a way of turning the mirror back on you. Go into their position and ask yourself, what would you do in that situation? And how much strength would it take for you to go through what you're expecting they should? So it's not a negative, stay away from judgment, but rather go through with judgment, but do so properly. And in this Mishnah, it's actually more explicit. The other Mishnah begins with, don't judge until you get to their place. But here it says, go ahead and judge them, but do so favorably. So the commentaries are all now going to discuss the value in that. The value in that, both for the person doing the judging and for the one being judged. So let's see. Commentaries presented here in no particular order. So the first says as follows. It's kind of a counterintuitive reading, but it's an interesting one. He links all three statements. Acquire for yourself a teacher, or make for yourself a teacher, acquire a friend, and judge everyone favorably. So he says like this, look, you got to have a friend and you got to have a teacher, right? But you see someone else who doesn't have a friend, doesn't have a teacher, don't think that that's a bad thing, judge them favorably. Maybe they're the kind of people who know how to handle it on their own. Because there are some unique people who can handle it on their own. And you see someone without a guide, without a friend, you have one, you're doing the right thing, good. But judge them favorably, maybe they know how to do it themselves. Kind of a counterintuitive reading, but that's how he puts it, this first commentary. Meaning they know how to go through life without a friend and a teacher. This guy's a loner, and you think you just follow the Mishnah's instruction to have a friend, to have a guide, and you understand that's the right way to do it, as the Mishnah just told you. And then you see someone else who's kind of a loner, not consulting a teacher, not consulting any friends, just living alone. So judge them favorably. Maybe they're the kind of unique characters that can handle that. Even though most can, but maybe they can. That's reading number one. Okay, so reading number two. This is an interesting one, which reads like this. Sorry. I thought it was like a welcome to me or something.
Sorry.
No problem. So the next reading is like this. When a person reads some sort of commentary, specifically he means commentary in Torah for some past generation, and me, the reader, I have a hard time understanding what's being said, or in my thinking, it would seem to me to be incorrect. Judge it favorably. Don't assume that the author of the book didn't think of what you're thinking. Probably did, and maybe just has a deeper understanding than you. And he reads, connecting it to the previous idea of having a teacher. I mean, your teacher might be able to show you the wisdom in what's being said here. Maybe a friend can show you the wisdom. Because when you read a book, an old Torah commentary, and it seems incorrect to your thinking, remember, these people were smart people. They probably thought of what you're thinking, and maybe they came to a different conclusion anyway. So judge the books you are reading favorably, and don't assume that because you didn't understand, therefore it's wrong. It's probably not wrong. Sure. Don't assume that it's wrong just because you disagree with it. This is what he says. And I would add that this is true of even contemporaries. Don't assume that the people who, in your mind, are doing the absolutely worst way of thinking and the worst ideology and the worst everything, that they're coming from a bad place. It's an unfortunate state of current political dialogue that the assumption is that people on the other side are bad, stupid people. It's a horrible assumption to have. People are not bad and people are not stupid. Maybe misguided, as we all can be sometimes, but stupid and evil, it's a very not good way to think. And it's just a general rule of thumb when you're consuming content, whatever the content is, if the premise is that their argument to get the other person is because the other people have bad agendas or because they're fools and idiots, probably not a good place to get whatever content it is you're consuming. We were talking about this on Shabbos, on Shavuos. The Gemara says that after Shammai and Hillel died, and they each had their schools, their yeshivas, and their yeshivas each promulgated their vision of Judaism, and the Jewish people were split over how to behave. Half the people following Shammai, half the people following Hillel, and it caused lots of unrest in the community. And at one point, the sages had to pick a side. And so they did. They picked Hillel. And the Gemara tells us two reasons why they picked Hillel, which are both related. Number one, because Hillel were nicer people. It's number one, which is kind of funny. Nicer? Aren't you looking for the absolute truth? Happen to be nice. Who cares about being nice? No, but they picked the nicer people. It's number one. And number two, says the Gemara, that Hillel, before they presented their own position, would first study the position of Shammai. And because they first studied their opponent and understood their opponents, and only then said, well, here's why we think otherwise, that's why the Gemara goes with Hillel. So if the position is, the assumption is, everybody disagrees with me is either evil, stupid, or both, probably not very healthy. Assume that, like sorry?
Sounds like true.
Assume that the other people are good people with good intentions, maybe misguided, as if we're never misguided, as if we have all the opinions that are 100% right all the time. And only the people who disagree with us, they're the ones who are misguided all the time, right? I'm being a little sarcastic.
Is it in a Jewish context.
Right. So he's talking about it in a Jewish context. When you read a book, specifically what he says is when you read a sefer, a book of Torah from some previous generation, and you don't understand it, don't assume that they're wrong. Just assume that you are lacking some understanding. I'm broadening it to include literally everything.
Really?
Literally everything. Very, very rarely are people specifically out to be bad. It's very, very rare. It's very rare. Even people who are actually behaving bad, you dig a little deeper and it comes from pain, it comes from disappointment, it comes from desperation. Very rarely are, like, how many people in the world are actually sociopaths? There's a percentage of people who are sociopaths, but it's not the majority of people. So there are people who are out to do bad, but 99.9% of the people are not. So there's misguided, there's pain in life, there's baggage, whatever it is. It's also for yourself. It's not a healthy way to walk around thinking that everybody disagrees with you is bad and stupid. It's just not a good way to live, like on your own. Unfortunately, in our polarized clickbait society, it gets more exciting if you tell, he owned him and he was totally wrong. And it's part of the clickbait mentality, but it's not healthy. My 2 cents. Anyway. Well, a little personal. I used to follow like politics like it was sports, right? Just for fun. I didn't really care about anything. I just followed it like other people follow sports. And then over the last couple of years, it got to a point where like it became so personal and people are fighting and arguing and like, is that important? Like, calm down. Do you really believe that the person on the other side of the table is a bad person? Like, really? If you ask them to borrow something, they'll tell you no because they're bad people? No, but they'll lend you whatever it is you're asked for. They're not bad people. They just happen to disagree with you, and that's okay. Like, it's fine. You have to assume that everybody's bad and stupid and evil.
Absolutely.
That's become the
absolutely.
Yeah.
If it's not good, cancel it.
Yeah, that's become the
point of view. Cancel it.
Like,
if it's yep.
It's like literally on every side of the table. Like, anyway, a lot more can be said on that topic, but I think that pretty much makes the point. Okay, so that's reading number 2.
Well, we've experienced that with COVID.
COVID certainly exacerbated that. Started a little before already, but definitely COVID exacerbated that. That's right. Yeah. Okay, now the next reading. Rambam, Maimonides writes as follows. He says like this. If you see someone, this is quite an interesting position. He says, if you see someone who in his entire conduct is a tzaddik, is a righteous person, and you see something that they do which seems to be the opposite of their nature of being a tzaddik, but if you were to like squeeze this scenario into some sort of extreme explanation, then it would turn out to be okay, then do so. You know this person by reputation, and you saw them do one thing, so that's it. Reputation gone, throw them under the bus. Don't do that. If you can find some way that it might be plausible that it's an okay activity, then explain it that way, rather than destroy a person's reputation in your mind. And he says the same thing in the inverse. You see someone who, which is kind of different than what I just finished saying. I acknowledge that, but he says the inverse. He says you see someone who's always just horrible and they do something nice, but there's some way to explain that maybe it wasn't so nice. Go with that explanation to keep the reputation consistent. He actually says that. Just putting it out there. It's kind of opposite of what I just finished saying, but that's what he says. Yeah. It's quite something. I'm going to apply the previous rule to this. Like, even if I don't understand it, I'm still going to accept that Grandma is smarter than me. So I'm going to repeat what he says. Sorry?
This goes back to looking at everyone favorably.
Yes. So then the Mishnah, which says to judge everybody favorably, is when it's in the middle.
But what was in the middle?
Meaning you don't have any reputation to go on to say that this person's bad. You have no reputation to go on to say the person's doing something good. And you see in a behavior which could be good or could be bad, go with the good. That's the instruction of the Mishnah. That's how he reads it.
So
quite interesting.
Judging someone favorably, you're not always supposed to give everyone the benefit of the
In
doubt.
Rambam's view, yeah.
And not you, if
Yeah.
somebody is a history of doing negative things.
Yeah.
And you should sort of assume they're still being negative.
Yeah, okay, since I know it's interesting, right?
Torah, like,
It's not, yeah, that's right. It's kind of the opposite of literally the opposite of what I just finished saying. Maybe what Rambam means is like a protective measure. Like someone has a history of, I don't know, abusive relationship or something. And all of a sudden they start acting nice to someone. Keep your suspicious antennas on, because if the person has a history of bad reputation, maybe there's some manipulation happening here. Maybe. So maybe that's what Rambam's saying. It's not explicit to what he says. He just says, you see someone who is well-known and constantly wicked, and you see him do something that looks like it's good, even if you find some way to explain how it's not, go with that. That's how he says it. But I'm just suggesting maybe that's what he means. He means like keep a protective measure up, and be a little wary. Just to put it in context, Rambam is, when it comes to laws of teshuvah, Rambam is on the extreme side of nothing stops teshuvah. Nothing. Even whereas other sources would say that kind of activity you're doing forever, Rambam lists the worst kind of possible sins and then conclude by saying, but nothing stops teshuvah. So it's not as if Rambam is, all wicked forever and that's it. But maybe, so that's why I'm suggesting maybe this is a protective measure. I don't know, maybe. Okay, so we had so far 3 readings. Number 1, you see someone who doesn't have a teacher like you do. Don't assume that they, assume that maybe they can handle it on their own. Reading number 2 is you read something that to your sensibilities doesn't seem correct. Don't assume they didn't know, they just have a different way of thinking. And reading number 3 is wicked people, probably wicked, good people, probably good. People in the middle, you should judge them favorably and give them the benefit of the doubt. That's a Rambam. Now, the third reading is a very interesting reading. This side. Fourth, sorry, yes, fourth, thank you. Keeping track, thank you. Is like this. If you see something happen to someone, and the assumption is the person failed, they could have done this, they could have done that, and they didn't, or whatever. Had you been in that same scenario, how many excuses would you come up with for yourself? We are all very good at that. We all know how to do it, to explain and justify why we did, the circumstances, this, that, and the other. Good. List all those excuses and apply it to the other guy. That's this. Midrash Chachamar. I actually don't have a name.
So judging the people on the basis of yourself.
Exactly. So this, getting back to the original point about instead of saying don't judge, say judge favorably. So in this thinking, it's kind of maybe what he's thinking is you can't avoid judging people. We just can't. We're human people. We're humans, and we see other people do things. We can't avoid it. Number 1. Number 2, what do you mean don't judge? Don't judge sounds as if there's no such thing as objective morality. There are certain things that are objectively just not good. So what, I shouldn't judge it? You can judge it, but how would you judge your own bad behavior, which you know is bad? You'd still give yourself 1,000 excuses, even when you know it's not good. Good, so you know someone else is doing not good. There's a judgment, but throw in all the excuses you would throw in for yourself too. Considering you can't avoid judging people, it's just the way we are. And all the excuses you afford to yourself, afford it to the next person too. Thought that was a good reading.
Well, what if you make excuses for the person repeatedly? And then for yourself, you're talking about.
Right. So maybe for other people.
Let's say making excuses for somebody else. You're excusing somebody else because of whatever, and they just keep repeating bad behavior towards you.
Toward you. Yeah. So maybe this is when we have to go back to Rambam's reading and say, assume they're negative and stay away.
Okay.
Maybe that's where the balance between these different readings come in. Right? Because that was Rambam's position. You see someone bad, assume they're bad. So if someone has repeatedly, especially if it becomes like interpersonal relationships where you become like the victim of an abuse, I don't think you have to assume that your abuser is a nice guy. Walk. Hopefully they'll see a doctor and get themselves fixed up.
Yeah.
No, I mean it. I'm not being joking. I mean it seriously.
I know you are, but it's pretty funny.
I guess it's a little dry humor, but I guess. Okay, another reading, which I thought was also very interesting, from Maharal.
It's easier to do that with a stranger.
Sorry?
It's easier with a stranger.
Yeah, so I guess that's what Rambam's kind of saying. When you know the history of someone, you know what to assume, but you don't have any history, assume it's good. That's kind of what Rambam was saying. When you have a history of someone who's, what's the word, consistently abusive, then assume that there's a malicious intent here, maybe.
But if you leave it to the person, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now here comes Maral and gets to a deeper reading, a deeper in terms of the person's own character, which is, sorry?
I'm just responding, it could be done.
Yeah, sure. Each individual case has to be handled individually, and refer back to the first part of the Mishnah. Get a teacher and get a friend, right? In terms of dealing with someone specific. Yeah.
Rolled up into what?
No, two different roles. Two different roles. And actually they're phrased differently. Make for yourself a teacher, acquire a friend. They're very different. Right? Acquire a friend is a give and take. As a teacher, I make for myself as if like almost self-imposed. Like even when I don't like what my teacher said, knowing that my teacher is objective and I'm not, I'm gonna listen. Whereas when it comes to a friend, there's acquire, there's a give and take. The word used is like kene, which means to buy. Like there's an exchange happening between friends. Versus a teacher, you impose upon yourself a teacher and just accept it, even when you don't like it, kind of thing. But anyway, we're looking at the last line, but that's also very important. Okay, the Maral goes to a deeper reading, which is he gets to the character of the person doing the judging. What kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be the kind of person that's happy for others, or the kind of person who's not happy for others? This is how he puts it. He connects it to Leiv Tov. The Mishnah elsewhere discusses the importance of having a good heart. He describes Aaron, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was appointed by God to be the leader, and he was told to go greet his brother. He meets God at the burning bush, and God tells him, go meet your brother. And Moshe is nervous because his older brother is going to be jealous of his younger brother's position. And the verse says that, where is that verse? Yeah, that Aaron was happy to see his younger brother succeed. And because he had a heart that was happy for his brother's success, younger brother, that's why he's the heart that was able to have the Urim and Tumim, the breastplate on it with the divine inspiration. Because divine inspiration only comes on a good heart. And what's a good heart? Explains the Maral. Someone who enjoys someone else's success, is happy when others are doing well. And the litmus test of that is, where does your mind go when you see negativity? Does your mind first go to, what a terrible person? Then whether the person is bad or not is question number two. But the fact that my mind went there means I'm lacking something in my heart that wants to see that as a negative person. But if my heart goes to my first instinct is, it was probably a mistake, you probably didn't mean it. Or maybe there was some good explanation, or finding some way that it's positive. Then even if it turns out to be negative later, fine, it might be negative, but it's indicative of the fact that I've worked on a good heart and I want people to be good. That's what I want out of other people. It's a much deeper reading. It's not just a functional reading, how should you judge others, but it gets to character building. Right? Getting back to the first comment I was making, the introductory comment, the Mishnah says, go out and judge others favorably. Yes, because you should be the kind of person who likes to see when others are doing well, and therefore you should train yourself that when you see something that looks negative, to automatically respond and say, it's probably good. I just didn't see the good. I don't know. We'll figure out how it's good later. But that's where I want it to be. It's indicative of your own character building. I'd rather see positivity, rather be happy for someone else's success. If I see failure, it hurts me. I was like, there's a mistake, probably there was a this, there was a that, because I want it to be good. So
not everything is always good.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Even if later we find out that this wasn't good, but what kind of character am I? Right.
But if we're honest and properly judging, if something is blatantly not good, and if we say, well, it really is good, we're not being true to our own
judgment.
Right. That's right. Which is why I said that there is a judgment. is just judge favorably, meaning, let's take the previous reading, giving the guy the excuses. Giving someone excuses doesn't mean that their behavior was good. It was genuinely bad behavior. I'm just giving them excuses the same way I would give myself, right? So there is a judgment, but with a bent of favorability. So here he's talking about not so much what you say about others, but the character of the kind of person who's looking for negativity in others or looking for the good in others. Even if it happens to be turned out at the end that it's a negative act and I have to accept that it was bad. But inside, I'd much prefer that the person do well.
Of course.
And not so, of course, all the time.
But
easier said than done.
If somebody
right?
is bad, even if somebody is bad, I would wish that they would be good and
Right.
not be
And
bad.
hence the judgment.
Huh?
Hence the judgment. But the judgment favorably, right? If it said don't judge, then you'd be right, which is the common modern thing. There's no morality, there's no makes no difference. No, don't judge. Everybody can do whatever they want. No, you can't. Torah says you cannot do whatever you want. There is moral judgment. But when you do it, you're going to do it favorably because you need to have a good character. That's kind of the...
Aren't you sort of, if you judge favorably when you know in your heart it's bad, isn't that not be honest with yourself?
Right. So then Mara would dig deeper and say, I should find it good.
Okay.
I should want it to be good. Hope it's good.
Oh, well, that.
Right. I want it to be good.
I want it to be good. Okay,
Exactly.
okay,
That's what you're saying. I want it to be good. And therefore my first instinct is it's probably not bad.
okay.
If I discover later it's bad, I have to accept it. But my instinct is I wish you, like my instinct is people are good. Probably. Until proven otherwise. Versus someone who's got a more cynical heart, if you want to use that word, everybody's bad until proven good. Right? There's I think what he's talking about here. Yeah, he talks about a good heart versus a Levi, like a negative heart. You know, like an assistant, you see this a lot with like you see this a lot in the Rabbi's learning and teaching and talking. Just I'll share with you something interesting. There are two sources about Mashiach's coming. One source reads, it's a Gemara, which says that in the same way a huge percentage of the population did not leave Egypt, when Mashiach comes, there'll be a population that won't leave. There is such a source. There's another source based on the verse, and Rashi quotes this verse in his commentary to Chumash, which is that God will take each and every Jew by the hand, no one left behind. Now, if I assume that all of you heard the latter source 1,000 times, that when Mashiach comes, no Jews are left behind. In Egypt, there was people who left behind, but that's no more because when Mashiach comes, every Jew is a Jew, and everybody's going to be taken by the hand. The reason why you heard it 1,000 times is because the Rebbe repeated it 1,000 times. I'm not aware of where the Rebbe put a caveat and said, by the way, it's only one opinion. There's another opinion which says some people are going to be left behind. So why is that? Is the Rebbe being dishonest?
Left behind where?
Left behind in exile.
That the whole world is going to become good and aware of Hashem.
Okay, so what exactly this other opinion means, I'm not sure, but just the thinking, right? So if think of it this way, if God came to you and asked you, said, I'm about to do this Mashiach thing. There's a lot of these people that really haven't been behaving. What do you say? Should we bring them along for the ride or leave them behind? What's your vote? What are you going to tell God? Oh, well, the Gemara says you have to leave them behind, so please do. Come on. Of course, you're going to say, bring everybody along. That's the point. Of course, there's a truth to that opinion, and we'll work out, when Mashiach comes, we'll answer to explain that opinion, along with 1,000 other questions we had for him. So we'll explain how that Gemara makes sense too. But as a Jew, what kind of person do you want to be? The kind of person who says, oh, all those bad Jews, they're going to be left behind. I have a source, look, it says. Or do you want to be the kind of Jew that promotes, of course, everybody's coming along, because every Jew is going to come along. Right?
Like a Noah's Ark situation.
Yeah.
So he tried. They didn't want to join him. What could he do?
I had a very good thought about that.
Okay.
And Noah and Avram both tried convincing people to follow.
Right.
Noah was unsuccessful for 100 years. 100 years, he was busy making his ark. And not one person joined him. And the whole reason why he did it for 100 years was because when people would come and ask him, he would tell them, well, because a flood's coming, and you better fix your ways, otherwise you're not going to survive. And not one person joined him. And Avram, to say, the verse says this, that they all had the whole following of people. So where's the difference in attitude? So I heard, who repeated this recently? I heard this from someone recently. that Noah scared everybody and used the negative. If you don't get on this ark, flood's coming and you're going to die. And they all said, thank you very much. Have a nice day. You know what Avram did? Gave him food. Opened his house, gave him food, love, love, and love. And look at that. He has thousands of people following him.
Sadiqas, you're gonna have to run the show.
Right? So it's a question of, right, a good heart is contagious. It's contagious, right? When people have positive attitude and positive energy and they find good in people, always, it's a contagious living. It's a good living. It grows. It's a character build, not the question of whether the other person's behaving or misbehaving. That's a secondary issue. The main issue is the character inside. What do I want? What am I looking for? Do I want everybody to be good, or do I want people to be bad around me? If everything I see is horrible and terrible, it's all ulterior motive and everything. Very deep. Okay.
Well, it was also depending upon where you live.
Sorry.
Your outlook is dependent upon where you live, your circumstances.
Certainly, there are a lot of things that play into it. Sure.
A lot of people from New York who are very sarcastic, to say the least. Whereas we people from somewhere else that are very open.
Yeah, certainly there's certainly a cultural and societal things that come into play here, definitely.
But if you learn and study and know things like this, then you could shape how you believe and how the people you are hanging out with or influence or whoever it is.
You become the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would even add, that oftentimes our tendency, I shouldn't say people, our tendency to think that only the macro problems have to be solved, often it's because we're absconding on our micro responsibilities. Like, instead of taking responsibility for what I have to do, I'm going to, in my head, say that there's a world that needs to be fixed so that I can keep on doing whatever I'm doing, as opposed to what are the things I can do here, then.
Or what do my actions affect
Yeah.
the big picture, but they do, because we start each one in our home with our kids or our family, our friends, siblings, whoever, and that spreads.
Yeah, the story is said about the Chafetz Chaim. I haven't read the source, but it's said about the Chafetz Chaim, which is that he was asked how he had such an impact on the globe. The Chafetz Chaim, the famous teacher who taught about the importance of avoiding lashon hara, avoiding gossip, and so on. It's his most well known for. Yeshiva, very, very influential person, even in his lifetime globally, pre-internet and pre-television. So they asked him how he had such a global reach. And he said, well, when I started out, I want to change the world. And I discovered the world is too big, so I decided I wanted to change my country. Then I discovered my country's too big, so I decided I'll change my city. City's still too big. I decided I'll change my family. And then I realized my family's too big, so I said, you know what, I'm left with just changing me. And when I changed me, turns out they've changed the world. In the reverse. Yeah, that's the story he says there. So you become the culture. We're gonna TM that line. All right, so final reading. This final reading has a double layer. So first is the Tanya. The Tanya in chapter 30 discusses someone who feels conceited and content in who they are and isn't motivated to grow. Even if they're perfect, he describes someone who literally follows every nuanced law in the code of Jewish law, but isn't motivated to push beyond. So what should he do? There's a certain sense of like self-assuredness and
Contentment.
Yeah, like I'm good, leave me alone, I'm fine. So he goes through a whole exercise in 2 chapters, 29 and 30, to crack that shell of this arrogance, of self-assuredness. And to break that shell, he goes through a whole deep meditative argument exercise in which the person is to look in the mirror and say, no, I am not fine. You got a lot of ways to go. And chapter 30, he says to do the following. The Mishnah, which says, don't judge anyone until you come to their place. So he reads the Mishnah to mean you should actually put yourself in someone else's place and then go judge. But not judge the other guy, judge yourself. Meaning, You're looking at someone else and say, well, they should have controlled themselves this way, and they should have done that, and they should have done this. Okay, go into that person's head, to their financial situation, to their societal situation, their personal situation, their temperament, to this, or that, and the other, and ask yourself, how much effort would it take for that person to do what you think they should have done? And then turn around and ask yourself, are you putting that much effort in your own life? This is the exercise he goes through to crack the shell of self-assuredness. Right? It's a very deep and almost counterintuitive thing where in all the other readings we had till now, we were told to kind of ignore the negative and apply some positivity to it, right? Whereas the Alter Rebbe was telling you, actually take the negativity into consideration. All the negativity, take it into consideration. And how much effort would it take for that person to not do X? Like I sit here in Montreal, my job is to get paid as a rabbi. It's very easy for me to keep kosher. And I'm going to sit and judge someone who's on a business trip alone who didn't grow up eating kosher for slipping once and eating something not right. I'm going to judge them. What kind of effort does it take for that person to not eat that food at that meeting? Am I putting that much effort into my learning? Not nearly. Right? So actually take all the negative into consideration and apply it to yourself. Maybe not in that challenge, but in whatever I have to do in my life. How much effort would it take for that person to do what I'm judging them to do and apply that kind of effort to yourself? This is what Tanya says.
Just an example that's easy, not eating, you just don't eat.
For some people, it's very difficult.
Must be some way.
For some people, it's very difficult. They grow up eating it. They're in a meeting. There's a social element. It's very, very difficult for some people. And that's exactly the point Tanya's telling you. Don't assume it's not easy because you decided it's not easy for you. Put yourself in their shoes. Is it easy for them? If the answer is no, then you put the effort, but you're expecting them to put the effort. Don't assume it's easy just because it's easy for you. Put yourself in their shoes. That's exactly what Tanya's saying.
It's sort of the opposite question I have. What about there are people who are so hard on themselves, always worried they're sinning, worried they're making the wrong choice, worried they're going to be punished, or like just always terrified that they're not good enough. How do you judge yourself favorably? Is there any commentary?
It's a very, very good question, and there's a lot of commentary, Tanya. So this, I just referenced 29 and 30, 27, 28, 26, 27, 28, and 31 all address that. I'm just selecting this out. The short of it is, he says that self-criticism, if it's not done with the premeditated direction of fixing X, is definitely coming from your animal soul. It's not coming from a good place. If it's coming from a good place, it would be done to begin with. Okay, we have X problem, we need to fix it, so I'm going to judge myself in order to fix it. But if it's just self-criticism, then it is definitely not from a good place and proof that you end up doing worse after. Right? Because I'm a bad person, so I might as well just continue doing bad. Right? So that's the short of it. But it's a lengthy exercise that goes through in 4 chapters to address this. In the Tanya, 26, 27, 28, and then 31. If you want to do that. Yeah. Very, very important chapters. So I selected 2 of them in the middle, in which he flips to someone who's the opposite and tells them to look in the mirror. And he only does that because the whole time he's telling people, okay, chill out about your sins, doesn't matter. Go forward and with joy because Hashem wants you to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, don't worry. Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So because he's going through that at length, he pauses to say, well, hey, you who are all self-smug because you're fine, hold on a second. No, you're not. So it's in that context where that comes up. Okay. Now, the Rebbe adds one more layer to this, which is as follows. All the readings we had, every one, describe adding a layer of positivity so that you don't look at the negative as it was. But where's the positive? The Mishnah says, Don lakav schus. We translate it as judge them favorably, but schus actually means merit. And kaf means like a spoon, like a scale. So on the scale, you have 2 kapim, you have 2 of those, what do they call it? Trays, yeah, the whatever, those things. And on one side you have the weight, the demerits, and on one side you have the merits. So kaf schus means judge them on the side of merit. So everything we said till now is to mitigate the negativity. Yeah, there's an excuse, it's very difficult for them, maybe they didn't mean it, or whatever excuse we're assigning. But where's the merit? Where's the merits? Asked the Rebbe. And here the Rebbe says something incredible. if a person has the kind of challenge that made them do X, it means that somewhere deep down, they have the power to overcome that, even if they didn't. Even if the person failed, fully failed, and therefore there's a full-on judgment. But beneath that, there's a merit, proof they were put in that situation. And maybe one day they will overcome it. And moreover, the Rebbe argues, the thinking and the speaking about others that they have that power within them to overcome is in and of itself, which will elicit that strength to overcome. And if the people around them, if us, we look at someone else and say, like to talk about being self-critical, right? If I see myself as a failure, because look, I failed yesterday. And that person's a failure because look, they failed yesterday. Everybody says, hold on a second. You failed yesterday and that person failed yesterday. That means beneath that failure, there's immense strength to overcome that incredible failure. And the more we talk about that strength, the more we ourselves will be able to overcome and the other person. So it's not just mitigate the negative, but actually the larger the negative, the more indication that there is a deep positive that we have to uncover. Because otherwise they wouldn't be presented with such a challenge if they didn't have the ability to overcome.
Is that true? That if you feel bad about something and you're never going to do it again, is that bring out the merit? Is that what it is? Or?
Right. Teshuvah is actually even less than feeling bad. Feeling bad is part, yeah. Feeling bad is part 2 of Teshuvah. Part 1 of Teshuvah is, I'm just not doing it again. Finished. That's it. Feeling bad is like motivation to make sure I don't do it again.
To transform it.
That's right. Exactly. But it's this, we're talking about the Rebbe's positivity outlook. Like for the Rebbe, the fact that the person did a sin is proof that he's got unbelievable power. Not only is he not bad because poor guy was struggling so hard and he failed because of the situation, it was like, oh, he failed? He must have a really strong soul. This is Rebbe's response. And therefore, there's an actual merit. Right? There's the famous story of a fellow from Italy who comes to the Rebbe by who's met Chabad in Italy and started becoming more engaged religiously, but had a non-Jewish girlfriend and couldn't let go. It's very difficult for this person to let go. And of course, his shliach, his rabbi, is busy telling him how terrible it is and yada yada, and your kids and your family and your future. This is everything, blah blah blah. Nothing's working. His heart is set, and he feels horrible about it because he's stuck. Becoming more religiously inclined, but his heart is stuck. This woman, this girl, whatever. So finally, he goes to the Rebbe for dollars, and the Rebbe tells him, "I'm jealous of you." What? So the Rebbe tells him, "Well, I never had the challenge to be attached to a non-Jewish girl. So clearly I don't have the strength to overcome that. But you are attached to a non-Jewish girl. That means you have the strength to overcome it. So you have a strength I don't have. I'm jealous." And that itself triggered within the person the strength to be able to overcome. And that's the judging favorably, not just to mitigate the negative because you assign excuses as you would assign for yourself, or don't assume malicious intent as we don't assume malicious intent for ourselves, and so on and so forth. But actually to see that the fact that the person has failed is in and of itself indicative of the fact that this person must have some strength that I don't, because I couldn't do that.
It's also like what you were saying,
Unbelievable.
approaching that in a positive way.
That's right.
Like,
That's right. That's right. So if you're talking about a leiv tov, a good heart, and if we're wanting to see good, and this gets to your question, Karen, right? Mm-hmm. The seeing good in this version is not to ignore the negative. It's because of the negative. Mm-hmm. Not being delusional about the mistake here. There was a terrible mistake and it's judgment.
I see it.
But because of that negativity, there must be something deeper that's positive here. And the more I talk about that, and the more we think that way, the more that positive will actually emerge.
And the feeling I said is more strengthened by this
Exactly.
opinion.
Exactly. So here you have it, 6, 7 layers on the same teaching. There are many more, but it's a nice sampling. So thank you all for the opportunity and thank you for listening.
That's amazing.